Sure. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Runnels. I'm the VP of Safety for Reliance. Uh, with a long history within the industry, everything from driving for 20 years to being in a safety department, driver school, created one of those, a lot of driver training. I was an over-the-road driver trainer. Spent some time on the actual insurance company side as a loss control rep and in sales. And now I've moved over to Reliance Partners, and we are a retail insurance agent that specializes in truck 100% logistics. And I get to help out as many customers as I can as we go along.
Good deal. Well, thanks for that, Brian. So getting into the meat of things right away, so the first thing we want to hit on is really, what do you do typically about, what are some things that we can do about warnings, citations, violations? I know they all kind of, there's, different nuances as we look at, the different areas there. But I mean, if you could just point out, Brian, some of the key things that we should be considering as, owner operators or, company drivers, anything we can do there, to help out with warning, citations, and violations.
I think one of the first things that we really need to emphasize is what's the difference between a warning, a citation, a violation, because that there seems to be some confusion there still. When it comes to citations and violations, a citation is something that you'll see that will affect your actual MVR. That's a ticket. That's an easier way to think about that. A violation is something that's been written on an inspection report. Warnings along the same lines as a ticket, that's not something that is necessarily on an inspection report. It'll be listed there, but that's not what affects a driver's CSA score. That is strictly the violations. So, I hear it sometimes, the driver got pulled over for speeding and he only received a warning and he got a clean inspection. Well, I probably doubt that, because the violation for the speeding is written on the inspection report, even though the inspector went through his logbook or went through the equipment, depending on what level of inspection they did, and didn't find anything wrong, but they still probably wrote that speeding violation on the inspection report. So that's the nuance. The violations on the inspection report hit your CSA. The citations, those hit your MVR. So that's kind of a real big difference. And one, each one has their own nuance that way. Gotcha.
Now from challenging those things, right? So, as we look at data queue challenges and some of those things that, that can be done, Brian, I mean, what are the differences, from a warning to a citation to a violation? I mean, do we need to be looking at that in a different way? Are there different things that we can do with each one of those categories?
Yeah, because a warning, if there's a violation written on the report for, let's say, speeding, since we're using that as the example, and there was a warning written, a warning can't be taken to court. A citation can. So a citation, you guys can take that, can assist them in getting that removed, and that violation is challengeable through a data queues. A warning, unfortunately, there's not much that can be done with that, and the violation is going to stick and is going to affect the CSA score, and it's not going to be able to be taken off.
Right. Is there something like a driver can do, Brian? So, I mean, I don't know if they can just ask, hey, I don't want a warning. Can you write me a citation? I mean, what have you seen in your experience, and, what works? Is there any words of wisdom you can offer the folks that are on the call?
Well, you can ask for the citation, because that's what your intentions are, to go and challenge that ticket. I shouldn't say challenge, because that's the wrong word. You're going to fight that ticket. At this time, most of enforcement of those two differences, and they will write a warning and then do the inspection and put that violation on the inspection report, and know that's not going to go anywhere. Another important difference to know is who is writing the warning or the citation? Is it somebody that's qualified and authorized to do the inspection? It could be a ticket or a warning. Then, that's going to act all the different if no inspection report was ever generated, because maybe it was a local law enforcement or somebody that's not certified to do inspections. Then there's a good chance that an inspection report wasn't written. I know here in Indiana, we've got a couple different levels. We've got law enforcement that isn't authorized, or I should say isn't certified to do inspections. There is a level of law enforcement that can do a level 3 inspection. That is your paperwork, your logbook, but they're not certified to go under the vehicle and look at the equipment and stuff like that, but they still can generate an inspection report, which plays into how they're going to write up a citation or a warning.
Gotcha. Good deal. Well, let's move on to the the next topic, Brian. So I mean, and I find this interesting, right? And I think there might be some folks that aren't aware of this, but as we look at the challengeable accidents, I'd like you to kind of talk through some of these and really point out, I mean, what do we do in the event that something like this does occur, and and the impact that can actually have on an organization or an individual.
Yeah, even any accident that happens to where, and when we talk challenging accidents, these are DOT reportable accidents. And that is, let's go back to the simplest version of what is a DOT accident. That is something that is nurse, hearse, or tow. Those are kind of, an easy way to remember. If somebody is taken a scene treatment, obviously a hearse fatality, or a tow due to disabling damage. And there's a nuance there, but if there's something towed due to disabling damage, that is going to be a DOT reportable accident. And it doesn't matter who's at fault on those accidents. It's going to show up on your CSA record and show up on your. So that's why it's important to understand which ones I'll go into and challenge and have them notated as non-preventable when it comes to the accidents. That topic that we can is what is preventability. Those are two different things, and fault doesn't matter near as much as preventability when it comes to a accident commercial vehicle. So let's say you have a DOT reportable accident, but it falls into one of these 10 categories. Struck in the rear, that's pretty self-explanatory. Wrong direction or illegal turn, that's going to be so important when it comes to the police report and getting that information to send in with your data cues challenge, because you got to be able to prove that somebody was making an illegal turn or coming head on at you going the wrong direction. If you were parked or legally stopped in a truck stop and somebody comes barreling in and hits you and their car has to be towed away, that's just one example of that. So you want to make sure that you are parked legally, and that's notated on the police accident report, I should say. Failure of the other vehicle to stop. If they were supposed to stop at a stop sign and they rolled through it and hit you, okay, that type of scenario there. If the other driver was under the influence, if the other driver had a medical issue, let's say they had a seizure or they had a heart attack or something like that, and they hit you, distracted driving on person's part, they were on the phone, and that's notated on the accident report. That's a good one. Cargo equipment, debris, stuff like that, falling off of another vehicle, infrastructure failure. If the bridge collapsed, and a chunk of concrete fell off the bridge in front of you, and you hit, now the vehicle's damaged and has to be towed, that's something that qualifies. Animal strikes, pretty self-explanatory. Suicide by truck, unfortunately, those things do happen. And then rare and unusual, that's that's a really vague term, but it has to be something exactly that. Very rare, very unusual. There was one, I think a plane emergency landed on a freeway and a truck hit it.
Wow.
That's pretty rare. That's pretty unusual. So,
Yeah.
it to fall into a very distinct category for being rare. So those are all things that, and when you challenge these things, you want to have that accident report. That's why it's so important for your drivers to take those good pictures, explaining what happened, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. Let's make sure we tell that story with those pictures, and get some words in a police. So all those play into it. And, find these 10 where we pulled these from. If you're not using the FMCSA's safety planner within the FMCSA's website, that is a great reference. And it is such a valuable reference because it things down in the simplest of forms. So, go in and I think that, Nick, you're going to supply a link to just the FMCSA safety planner. And that's where we pulled this from. And it's really, really helpful.
Yeah. So, I think that's an important thing to know, Brian, right? So, there's a bunch of great information and it really breaks it down in a simple format. So you don't have to dig through regulatory stuff, right? So when we send out the recording for the webinar, we'll make sure we include that link to the safety planner. So that's all good stuff. One question I have for you, Brian, is, as we look at these challengeable accidents, are there things, like me as an individual driver, maybe I, own a fleet of trucks. Is there some things that I can do to really help me out, to maybe go in and fight this stuff? Is there like technology I should be looking at, that might be able to support some of the things to help me fight, some of these challengeable accidents?
Yeah, I think as we get further and further down the road, they're such a valuable resource because any of these accidents really could be told if there's a camera in there. Not necessarily rear facing, just, the forward facing is such a valuable asset. So that is one, probably the most effective way have that to have that go in your favor is being able to show that.
Right. Yeah. And so I came from the technology space before joining TVC, where I worked at both PeopleNet and Smart Drive. And, that was one of the big things, right? We were, constantly hearing about, all these nuclear verdicts. We hear about that in the news, it seems like on a weekly basis. And, and to your point, Brian, cameras and event recorders are some of the best ways that you can protect yourself as a, company owner or an individual driver. And, because it really paints a picture on what actually occurred. So, yeah, great point. So as we look at, wrapping things up here, one of the questions I have for you is like, so you're on the insurance side of the business, right? So, as we look at all these things, what are the key items that you would point out, Brian, to really have an impact on lowering the insurance premiums? And now I know that doesn't happen overnight, right? But, things that, the folks on the call, that they might be able to implement to really help reduce some of those costs. Because, as they look at costs, and that's one of those things that, can sometimes creep up. So.
Yeah, it is. And, when there is something that you can take a look at and challenge, that's a good, that's a great start. But being able to be proactive and putting a good platform in place to avoid the accidents, to avoid the citations and violations, using technology that's not only in the truck but that's available through other vendors, and just a driver training and a driver culture to create a to create a culture that is forward thinking, saying, let's make sure that we're proper, using proper speed. Our logbooks are up to date. We're doing good pre-trip inspections. Because so many of these times when vehicles are pulled over for an inspection, going back to that part of it, the inspector's already got some sort of violation because it was either pulled over for an observable defect, meaning something maintenance related, or an unsafe driving behavior, whether it's erratic lane changes, following too close, speeding. They've already got something on you.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to prevent that, and those, let's face it, those all lead to logbook violations. And whether it's something major in a logbook or something ELD related, not having the ELD mounted correctly, or not having your response card or your instruction card, not having, not knowing how to transmit the logs. It's all this stuff that goes into, are the drivers aware of everything they need when it's time for an inspection? So those things go into an insurance cost. So because the higher the CSA score, not necessarily, I want to say directly related to a higher premium, but what that does is it cuts down on competition.
Right.
There's only certain insurance companies that will look at an account that has 3 alerts. It really cuts down on look at your insurance, because the more people that will look at it, the more competition happens. And that's how you get a better rate. So driving a culture and to have more competition on your insurance needs is typically what's going to lead to a better price.
Gotcha. And that's not something that happens overnight, right? So, I mean, this is all about, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's all about putting proactive measures in place. And, so, I mean, oftentimes we can find ourselves in a reactive situation, like, hey, this just happened, what do I do now? But it's all about getting ahead of the curve, right? And putting those proactive measures in place to avoid, potential issues down the road. And I mean, ultimately leading to, better scores and, long-term better insurance premiums, because it becomes competitive at that point, because people want your business.
It makes for someone like us to go out and the insurance for an account, we've made these improvements, and you, as the score dropping incrementally, the ability of this account to get better and better and better, and that into consideration. So yeah, absolutely right. That's how you want to attack it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent stuff. Before we get into the question answer session, Brian, I mean, is there anything that we missed, or, I mean, maybe it's the top thing that you would point out to the folks, listening on the call, or folks that are going to be listening to the recording? I mean, what are the top, if you had to pick one thing, right? What would that one takeaway be, for the folks on the call that they should be thinking about, or that they should implement?
Look past and creating a proactive attack for the future. When you look back on your scores and maybe your accident last 2 years, is there a spike? Is there a certain month? Is there a certain location? Where are we getting the violations? What type of violations are we getting? Okay, let's direct some training in us too. Hey, we need to watch when we're going into this certain area. We need to know that we've been dinged there pretty hard over the last 6 months, 12 months with violations. So we got to talk to them about that going forward. So look back to plan for the future.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. So just a handful of questions here, and folks, feel free to type in additional questions. We'll use the last little bit of time here to go through this. But the first question, Brian, is: are you aware of any changes coming to the Preventability Program? And this person says, in my experience, the program has been worthless about 75% of the time. For example, an out-of-service violation recorded during a post-crash inspection will result in preventable under the program, even if the crash satisfies the criteria for non-preventable under the program.
It could. Yeah, there's no doubt. I don't know of any changes off the top of my head happening currently. but yeah, if there's a violation, now the other thing caused by the crash, so that would be something as well. But in that particular topic, uh, yeah, that would disqualify the accident from being challenged. I don't changes coming right now.
Okay. So Joshua Joycutty's got a handful of questions here. So the first one being, how much driver turnover is directly related to violations, whether unfair or fair?
I think driver turnover and growth both play into a violation direct on violations. Growth, particularly because a company that grows too fast, they kind of lose control and lose sight of what's going on out there. The turnover, it seems unfair to the company, but it's what has to be done. It's just a continuous training and continuous messaging to your driving force that, hey, this is what we believe in. This is something that we're going to follow. And you start building that culture and people start understanding who you are and what you're all about. But turnover does have an effect on violence.
Thank you, Brian. Next question. Say someone gets 3 unsafe driving citations in a month. How much would that impact their insurance rates? And what about 10 citations in the last couple of months? So, I mean, really, looking at it, like how big of an impact do citations really have on the insurance premiums, Brian? And is that something that takes place immediately? Is that something that, takes a little bit of time for the insurance rates to go up? Or how does that typically work in your experience?
Well, this is interesting because it's the unsafe driving citations. What that's going to have a direct effect on is the driver quality when an insurance company is looking at the risk. So if it's unsafe driving violations, that's what's driving up the CSA score. So this is what I mean by there's a little bit of nuance and difference. If you've got violation that's driving up the CSA scores, that really has a direct effect because those things update every month. The citations, if they're being challenged, then maybe some of them, if you've got drivers at risk of being on that borderline of your driver quality hiring standards, then that's going to come into when it's time renewal. So I hope that answers the question. If you're getting citations and you're not doing anything with them, up training done, that has there been, what are the citations, how bad were they? What have you done with the driver? Are they actually violation on an inspection report? So is that driving up the CSA score? That's going to have an impact. So yeah, the more you get, sure, the more it's going to affect your rate because your driver quality is either going to be substandard or your CSA score is going to be high in the unsafe driving category.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So, the folks on the call know TPC Pro Driver, we can help out with the citations, right? We can go challenge those, fight those, and have a great success rate on reducing or dismissing. But ultimately, what you want to be looking at too is, going back to the proactive measures and, what are some things that I can, put in place to ensure that, we're addressing the root cause, the root issue, right? And, how can we, potentially avoid those citations? One, challenge them when they come up, right? We of course want to do that, but more importantly, how can we help avoid those things? And I think that goes back to putting some of those proactive measures in place that you were talking about, Brian.
Right. And you have that plan when a citation comes in, what you're going to do with that citation as soon as you see it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, your insurance provider is going to take a look at those things, right? I mean, if they see like you're doing these things, you have these measures in place, and now we're seeing trends trending in a different direction, in a positive direction, that's going to have a direct impact on your overall insurance premiums.
And let's not forget, just because you can challenge or you can fight that ticket, let's not forget it may have actually happened. So, there needs to be a discussion with the driver, and there needs to be some standard set for going forward. Even though we may get this dismissed, doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. So
Right.
something needs to be as far as either retraining or just actions or something the driver to try to avoid it from happening again. Just not woohoo, I got off on this ticket, and I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent point. We might have time for one more question. Yeah, so if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box. We'll give it 2 more minutes, and then we can wrap up. So it looks like we have an additional question here from Charles. So Charles is asking, let's say driver hit your vehicle and promised to fix the damage and later refused to cooperate by paying for the repair. How can you report that accident?
Most insurance companies will tell you need to report an accident happen, and just for report purposes. Someone else hits you, then it's important to get that on the books just for this exact scenario. So they have a record of when it happened, where it happened, what happened. And if something goes sideways, then, the insurance company can step in. They see it often where usually it's driver's fault. And we're going to go ahead and pay that physical damage claim or get their or whatever, and they don't report it to the insurance company, then they pay for the repair, but all of a sudden now somebody's got a neck injury, and the insurance company didn't know that the accident happened in the first place. That will affect your insurance rates going forward for sure.
So that, I mean, the net of it is, make sure you're reporting everything.
Yeah, even if it's just for reporting purposes only. And you can tell that your claims people at the insurance company that, hey, this is for reporting only. We're gonna pay this out.
Yeah.
And go about it that way. But they need to at least know about it, especially how litigious the things are right now. Things can get out of whack pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great takeaway right there. I mean, because you can report it, and I mean, that's not going to have an impact. But if it comes back, 6 months, year down the road, at least you reported it at that time, and now, I mean, you can have the coverage that you need. Correct?
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, folks, we're at 2:30 Central Time here. Brian, I want to thank you, number one, for for joining. Really appreciate you jumping on. You provided a ton of valuable insights. And then thank you to the rest of the folks that joined us here today. Appreciate all the questions and engagement. What we'll do is we'll send out a copy of the recording along with a couple of links, with some informational stuff that you guys can use as resources. And then Brian's contact information will be included here as well. Brian, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing you'd be happy to take calls from folks, if they're looking to, if they have additional questions, maybe they're looking at coming up on an insurance renewal, to see if there's ways that Reliance Partners could potentially help them out as well.
Absolutely, to help. And yeah, I always will answer my email and answer my phone.
Awesome. Well, thank you, folks. Appreciate it. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
See ya.